Nightcrawler was released in 2014 and stars Jake Gyllenhaal as the leading man Lewis. And this one is a little bit underappreciated, in my opinion. Not very much talked about in the film community, I guess. I mean, outside of mainstream, like this one certainly was snubbed for a lot of awards, in my opinion, when it comes to the Academy Awards, the Golden Globes, whatnot. Because Jake Gyllenhaal's performance alone is outstanding, and it is a very unique film that I don't know if I can compare it to too many other films. It's got and I say some modestly, drive kind of vibes when it comes to the cinematography. Definitely not as heavy on the neon and as heavy on the color that Drive had with that synth and that 80s vibe and that vibrantness of it. But it's definitely got a much, much darker tone in its plot and in its visuals and cinematography and just in its tone in general. But man, does Gyllenhaal carry this film like a professional. Like, outstanding work. And so does everybody else. I didn't really look at the actors and actresses' names per se before doing this review, but he basically plays a night crawler, and that is somebody who goes out at night recording footage of anything that can make news: crimes, car accidents, anything usually tragic, but anything that'll get people's eyes on the screen, kind of thing for the morning news. So Gyllenhaal is basically there's a lot of reasons why I think this film is super genius, but starting off with the basic plot, Gyllenhaal plays this very much sociopathic, career obsessed guy who is kind of antisocial. I mean, he doesn't like forming relationships outside of relationships that completely benefit him. So he is one hell of a selfish, self centered human, that has really no sympathy for anybody else, again, unless it's serving him and his goals and what he wants, basically. And he discovers the television industry basically by coming across this crime where somebody's filming at, and then he kind of develops this interest in it, and he goes full force into finding TV stations, getting his own equipment, and which basically at the beginning of the movie, the main way that he makes money for himself is stealing things and selling them to pawn shops and shit like that. And his negotiating skills are top notch. This guy can basically sell ice to Eskimos, and he's just so well spoken. It's scary, especially when you start to get to know the psychopathic tendencies of this guy. He basically does not stop until he gets what he wants, and he has this very kind of autistic personality where he's extremely obsessed with detail, and he has like a brain like a freaking supercomputer where he just retains facts and information, and whether he's telling the truth or not, because he's a compulsive liar too, to get what he wants, it always sounds like he knows everything about everything. Like there's a scene where he steals a bike and tries to sell this race bike to like a bicycle, cross country road bicycle kind of thing that you use in races, a race bike. And he's selling it to this pawn shop owner, and he's going through, like, it has 36 gears, and he's riding it around the store, and he's like, the guy offers him like $300 for it, and he's like 2,500, and that would be just giving it away. I won the Tour de Mexico on this bike, and he's just like, off the top of his head, he's a natural. I don't know if natural or practice, but man, is he good at what he does. And then he, throughout the film, as he goes more into this obsession, which is the only way to put it, on recording news footage for stations and stuff like that, he eventually starts to manipulate situations and crimes. He begins to manipulate the environment around him and premeditate and actually create havoc situations for him to be able to record, for him to be able to know exactly what he's doing at these places and to sell to these stations. He ends up coming across a station which is run by a woman, or the person who puts the stories together pretty much. Her name is Nina. And Nina is this middle-aged, very professional, very business focused woman. And of course, the lead, Lewis, basically researches the hell out of her with everything that's on the internet and gets all this information to the point where he begins to manipulate her, and even to a point where he kind of what would you call it? Not blackmail, but give her a bunch of ultimatums, ridiculous ultimatums, basically like, if you don't date me, I'll stop selling to you, kind of thing. One of the biggest things, in my opinion, that I think makes this film super genius, as I was mentioning before, is how good he is at what he does, and how much inspiration and motivation this guy can give, but at the same time being a sociopath and a psychopath. He hires this guy named Lewis hires this guy named Rick, this young kid who's a couple years out of high school. He looks like he's in his 20s, but he mentions he just graduated high school not too long ago, so I'd assume he's probably 19 or 20 or something like that. And he hires this kid to be an assistant for his company that he just created himself. And Lewis basically puts so much pressure on this guy and offers him like an internship instead of. Eventually, they negotiate for Lewis to pay him $30 per night, which is nothing in retrospect of what this kid is asked to do, and Lewis is just so obsessed with the job that he's psychotic. Literally, he speeds. He doesn't care about the safety of anybody, but he's always dropping this entrepreneurship dialogue, and he's so smart about the business, where if you erased the sociopath and the psychopathness of him, he would actually be a really, really awesome mentor to have, an awesome teacher to teach you entrepreneurship skills and business skills, because this guy is such a genius, and that's what makes him scary, is the fact that he also has no remorse for anybody. And like, he drops that whole famous fear acronym, false evidence appearing real. And I love one scene where they're getting gas for his car in his gas station, and he tells Rick, he's like, "I'm very proud of you. You're learning very fast, and I'm very much appreciative of how much you've learned. However, I also noticed that you spilled some gas on my car, which is gonna eat away at the paint. And I need you to never do that again. Otherwise, I will terminate you on the spot. Do you understand me?" Jake's eyes, I have to mention the guy's eyes. I'm telling you, he dove right into this character. His eyes are fucking huge when he talks to somebody, and he's so direct, and he looks like a psychopath. And he stares into your soul, and you can see into his. It's ridiculous. It is so terrifying when he's talking serious mode, and he's a machine. He's a monster. It's fucking crazy. Now, I'm the type of guy who can, like, I would get anxious around a guy like this. Like, I would not stay a day working for this guy. I'd peace out so fast. No amount of money, no career opportunity. I don't care what position I was in. I mean, I started to, like, I'm putting myself in Rick's shoes. If I was in Rick's shoes, I wouldn't last more than 24 hours with this guy, because I could just he seems dangerous. I could read the danger, and this Rick kid really, really, I mean, he was desperate, and obviously Lewis takes advantage of his desperation for a job and for everything going on. Lewis breaks into homes in crime scenes. Like, there's, in the middle of the film, there's this home invasion at a mansion, and these two guys go into this mansion and kill three people in there, two being women. And he goes into the house. He does so many things that are against jurisdiction and illegal, highly illegal. He goes into this house and starts filming everything. He goes upstairs. He goes into the baby's room. There's a baby's crib. It just disturbs the fuck out of you, because you don't want to know what's in that crib. And he just films it nonchalant, like inside. There was no baby in the crib, by the way, but the music, like the baby music, is going on with the baby toys and everything, and you're just so disturbed. And he's filming this guy in the kitchen floor too, this older guy, and the guy on the floor starts to cough and kind of groan, and he doesn't give a shit. He just films what he needs to and like pieces out. And he's, like I said, amazing at his job and dedicated to what he wants, but he's a sociopath. He doesn't care about anybody but himself to get everything that he wants. In the date that he asks this woman that he sells to, Nina, out to a Mexican restaurant, and the whole conversation is basically him threatening her security at this place, which is the lowest rated television broadcast station in all of Los Angeles. I really like the Los Angeles atmosphere in this film too. They really played it out with the scenery and had beautiful shots of Los Angeles at night, especially, and and the atmosphere and the cinematography was really really well done in this film. And I really liked Rick's character too. It was such a disappointment at the end of the film when Lewis, like a complete psychopath, there's this car accident scene, and he notices that the criminal inside the vehicle, the crashed vehicle, is extremely dangerous. Excuse me, but gets Rick to come out and take the shot anyway. He knows he's alive in the van, but he tells Rick that he's dead. And then Rick comes along and gets the shot, and just the expression on his face, noticing that this guy is still alive and has a weapon in his hand, and gets shot like 4 or 5 times and just loses his life. And then here comes Lewis filming Rick dying and telling him, I couldn't risk the business, I couldn't risk the video productions, whatever the company's name is, for an untrustable employee. And he says this nonchalantly, even when Lewis is like in the car outside of that restaurant where that shootout happens. He's like, what if the problem was that it's not that I don't understand people, it's just that I don't like them? And then he threatens physical violence onto Rick. So you know what I would do in that situation if I was Rick? Because this is after Lewis calls the cops to report these two guys in the restaurant. I would play cool, play casual, and then as soon as the cops come, just go to the cops and report that fucker. Unless, well, that's probably what I would do, but at the same time, knowing how crazy Lewis is, he might weasel his way out of being arrested or being tried or whatever, and then come after me later. So I probably would worry about that. But yeah, just the fact that the fucker threatened violence on the guy just because he doesn't want to. It's like he had him in his grasp. Like Rick was in a bad situation. He's basically a captor, he's held captive. He's held prisoner. Fortunately, there are these two detectives that are basically onto Lewis. Now the film doesn't end with Lewis getting caught. The film ends with his business growing and him still being out there with new employees and new lives to wreak havoc on, basically. But these two detectives are on him, especially this one female detective who basically tells him to his face that she doesn't believe a word he says and that he's full of shit on everything. So you're left with some hope at the end of the film that he will be, sought after and caught for his criminal activity. But man, like when it comes to his smarts and his genius, he is one genius criminal and genius psychopath, which is the scariest kind. I love his charm to him too. At the end, he tells this female detective, he's like, I usually like to say, if you're seeing me, you're probably having the worst day of your life. Meaning, as a cameraman, as somebody who generally records horrific events, generally if somebody is in front of his camera, they're usually dying, which is kind of a fucked up thing to say, especially the way he says it, where he just doesn't care. There's another camera guy who has his own business that he ends up doing something to the vehicle to mess up mess up the brakes or something like that, because it ends up getting into an accident, and then he goes to that scene of the accident, he's filming him, and the guy, his name is Joe, is on a stretcher being put into an ambulance, and he has a neck brace, so obviously he can't like talk, and he's just groaning, and he's just staring with the eyes of fear into Jake Gyllenhaal's character Lewis, and Lewis is just filming him like getting the story, getting his job done, and that's it. That's all he needs is what gets him paid and what gets him status. It's insanely criminal what this guy is able to get away with for the time being. There's only this is a 5 out of 5 film, first of all, and I give it 95 out of 100. Why out of 100? I hate decimals. There's only two minor nitpicks that I have to give to the film. One is some of the score. Some of the score I find really out of place and not fitting to the cinematography and the vibe that everything is going for, like the tone of the movie. Some of the score is just kind of, like I said, it doesn't belong. Like they could have changed it up to something else that would have seemed more fitting. It does work in some films where the score kind of feels out of place from what's going on screen, but it just didn't work in this one, in my opinion. That's a nitpick, though. It doesn't bring the film any lower, and neither does my next point. But in the climax of the film, where the scene where Rick gets shot down by this guy in the car and Lewis tricked him into getting that shot, why the guy in the van didn't start shooting at Lewis? Because Lewis clearly said to Rick, "He's dead. You can come get the shot," and he was right in front of the guy in the van. So was he trying to trick the guy in the van by saying he's dead, so the guy in the van would play dead? Because, but what I would assume is the guy in the van, as soon as he saw Lewis, he would start shooting at Lewis. But no, Lewis got there, saw him, was able to back up a bit and get the shot of the entire van, and then Rick comes along to get the shot of the guy inside the van, the criminal, and then as soon as he gets there, the criminal looks at him and shoots him 4 or 5 times. And then he gets out of the van, and he's all hurt and stuff. He still has the gun in his hand. And he looks at Lewis, and Lewis looks him dead in the eye with no fear at all. None. No fear whatsoever. And the guy who just got out of the van just stares at him and then turns and sees that the cops are coming, so he runs after the cops and starts shooting at the cops. So his gun was still loaded. He wasn't empty. He didn't empty it out on Rick, but it just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever why he wouldn't start shooting at Lewis. It's just a plot hole that, because the rest of the movie is so damn near perfect, it's not something that would bring this down to a 4.5. It still remains at a 5 and a 95 out of 100, which is still a 5 out of 5, because anything 94 and under to me is where it starts to get to a 4.5. But yeah, the acting is superb. Nina's character, the actress who plays Nina, is superb. Rick is probably my favorite character in this film, even more than Jake Gyllenhaal, because of how good of a kid and such a somebody with such a strong heart, and just he's funny. Like, he's just, the things he says sometimes isn't intended to be funny, and he's not intending to be like humorous, but he's just so sarcastic. Like when he's asking for the raise. Oh, and by the way, that reminds me too, is another scene that I need to talk about, which is genius. When Lewis offers the opportunity to give Rick a raise and promotes him to vice president of Video Productions Incorporated, whatever he calls it. He's like, pick a number, any number, and that's what your salary is. And he's just so humble. The poor guy, he's just so humble. He's like, I don't know, 75 a night, 75. Jake Gyllenhaal's character Lewis is like, absolutely, and they shake on it, and he's just he's like, can I get any more than that? And Lewis is like, maybe another time. We close the deal. And Rick is like, I could have gotten more, couldn't I? And Jake's like, absolutely. And it's just so, it's genius because in a business standpoint, an entrepreneurship standpoint, like, it's true. Like, he closed the deal at 75, but he realistically could have gotten so much more, and Lewis would have paid him that so much more. But it's fucked, because when you know the kind of person and the kind of sociopath that Lewis is, you just get even more heartbroken. And because this kid Rick was so humble and such a good person, a good moral person, which is the opposite of what Lewis is, it just breaks your heart even more at the end when he gets shot down. It's such a a gut wrenching moment in the film. But that's what also makes the film so impactful too. And it's just an unfortunate set of circumstances with some really really well developed characters. I love the scene at the end too where Lewis and Nina are in the studio where she's watching this footage of him filming Rick dying, and they're just staring into each other's eyes like they're two sociopaths that found each other and are connecting. And she's like, "It's beautiful," and he's like, "How bad do you want it?" And she's like, "I want it so bad." And it starts to sound kind of sexual too, and the music in the background, the score is like very like soft and like kind of mesmerizing and romantic, and you're seeing these two psychopaths or sociopaths, what seems like it, just forming this fucked up bond. It's just so messed up. Such a well directed film and such a well scripted film, finished off with such an amazing cast and dedicated cast and perfect, well rounded characters. It's just so good. So, easily gets a 5 out of 5 and a 95 out of 100. Again, why out of 100? Because I hate decimals. We all know this. So it's definitely one heck of a recommendation for me if you're still watching this video, even though you know this is a spoiler review. And for anybody who has seen this film, tell me what you guys thought, because, like I said, I I mean, this is a well-deserved 5 out of 5 for me, and yeah, that's there's not too much more I can say other than this should have gotten a lot more attention and a lot more awards than it had. This is another Prisoners situation, the film Prisoners, which was again severely underrated and has Jake Gyllenhaal in it too. I just remembered that. Yeah, poor Jake. He's in so much good stuff and not recognized for everything, unfortunately. But yeah, that's Nightcrawler from 2014. Subscribe to Morgan Film Fan if you like to listen to my voice or if you like my film reviews. I'll be back with more soon, so check out what's on the channel. Stay tuned for what's coming, and until next review, take care and cheers.